Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Here to do a review of really a documentary, or it's like a two-part series documentary. It's on now. It's known as HBO Max again. Um, Known as Pee Wee by Himself, which is about Pee Wee Herman, you know, um, Paul Reubens or Rubenstein, something like that. Originally, his name was, but he passed away. I thought it was last year, but it was actually 2023. Yeah, like the summer of 2023. It was Richard Simmons was last year, I believe. But um, it was. I mean, it was two parts, so it was like almost over 3 hours. And So it was pretty thorough. It was in some ways there's a lot of footage. Like what happened was, so he passed away. He passed away of some form of cancer. Let's see here. Who was the director of this? I forget. Um, I forget the name of it. Stars, Cassandra Peterson, Lynn Marie Stewart. His name is Matt Wolf, not the golfer, and not named Matt Wolf something else. But anyway, um, he, Paul Reubens, you know, had been shooting footage for several years. What did Matt Wolf do though? Teenage, Spaceship Earth, Wild Combination, Portrait of Arthur, Baird and Me. Not a lot of stuff. The Face of AIDS. It's Me, Hillary, the Man Who Drew Eloise. A lot of stuff that was really more cult. Though he goes back to 2004 even. So he's a younger director, but something called Soaps he's doing, a soap opera thing. I don't know. Um, but so he had been shooting like footage of through like a lot of people shot document like footage of different things that happened in his life, his private life, and of course there's a lot of footage of his career, and you do learn a lot about his career that probably most people wouldn't know. They know him for being Pee Wee Herman, being Paul Reubens, um, originally, and as a public persona as Pee Wee Herman, um, and of course the movies and Pee Wee's Playhouse, the show, um, and some of the stuff also like he did a lot of like touring stage work, performances as Pee Wee Herman. Um, and then like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I knew him for a little bit. I mean, that movie I've seen a couple times, but it was just a bit part really. Um, and he showed up in some of the movies later, but and then he did like they revived the Pee Wee character after having the controversy. Of course, it was addressed to some degree. Um, so a little spoiler, it was addressed, the whole thing that happened in the it wasn't like an adult theater actually, um, but and then later having like some because he was a I wouldn't say he was like necessarily a hoarder exactly, but he was a collector. He was a saver. He was someone who basically preserved and accumulated, like a lot of people, like stuff. And so he really had like a museum. I guess he was pretty organized with it. But so of course, including his lifestyle and the fact he was. I don't know if he ever like came out and maybe until later came out of the closet, but so he had his share of adult content, and I forget the exact source they said in the document. This is like 4 or 5 days, like almost a week ago. I saw it. It was 6 days ago, but the whole child pornography thing, and I only vaguely remember it was like 2002 or 2003 when that came out. At that point, he was so much lower on the totem. I don't follow the gossip, news magazines and stuff like that, and the shows and nearly. I mean, at one point I probably did more, and I used to listen to some of the. I do listen to talk radio, but not what I in the 2000s. I was paying attention to it even less. Um, but so that was something I kind of remember, but don't remember that much. But so it's a long. It chronicles a lot of his early life, story, the typical documentary series, but But then he was making it like, and he had this cancer diagnosis for many years, but he never came out publicly with it. But so he probably knew he wanted to have a documentary done of himself, which isn't typical, I guess. Um, and he must have sort of had to compromise to some degree, I don't know, for financial reasons, or he just knew his time was limited, with to have someone actually direct it. Mainly, I say this because maybe initially he didn't have too many issues, had a pretty good rapport with this person. It was stressed at times through the latter part of the documentary how um he like they almost had like arguments and he didn't want him to cut the film, so they actually included some of these parts about that. It's like, well, this is what you really should be doing, and if I was doing the documentary, this is, I shouldn't be filming me now, or this is what would be filmed, this shouldn't be cut, all this stuff. I don't think he was that thrilled with the documentary person, but he kind of just contractually had to do it after signing it and being paid. Maybe he was getting paid. I don't know. That was the impression I get. Is like, why did this occur and this come across this way? Now, HBO and this director Matt Wolf wanted to include that in the whole portrayal in this way it was shown in this. But why wouldn't he just want to do his? Why wouldn't he have to have him and his estate, I guess, have final say on a lot of the stuff with the documentary? Because while I think he probably was okay with it, and they stopped filming at some point. That was one thing because he just it was like, and then they stopped filming, or like there's parts they didn't film one day. He died not that long after, like they were while they were filming it. Um, but why didn't he just like why didn't he do this before and just like he could have done this maybe instead of 5 or 6 years ago, it could have been a decade ago. He didn't have cancer then. I don't know. I mean, also the thing was weird is he said his birth date. He was born in 38. Not even close. He was born in 52. But the way he portrayed himself as Pee Wee Herman, he was saying Pee Wee Herman, the actual persona, which he became in some ways, like Bowie with the start with the Ziggy Stardust in some ways, Ziggy. Public persona, he was saying he was 38, so he was whatever 14 years physically younger than the character he was portraying, the person he was portraying publicly, but he went like 15 years maybe, appearing on talk shows, on like award shows, and any public appearances and everything just as Pee Wee Herman. He was not Paul Reubens. Even though I don't think he never changed his name legally. Actually, there was one point that's like the name of something he released. I forget, it was the soundtrack maybe for one of the movies was under Paul Reubens, and people he never got credit for that because it was Paul Reubens. People didn't know who Paul Reubens was; they just knew Pee Wee Herman. So it kind of shot him in the foot. He was like, the thing is, he portrayed several characters. The Pee Wee Herman character was the most successful, but he had other characters he was doing. The whole connection with like Phil Hartman, and he had, Paul Reubens. Paul Reubens. It was Paul Reubens at that point was trying to get on Saturday Night Live, and then um, they went with Gilbert Gottfried instead in the early '80s. It's just weird. Which I mean, Gilbert Gottfried was kind of a footnote on SNL. He had a career later, but it's weird to think. And then his right hand man, who's like co-wrote the Pee Wee's Big Adventure movie and everything, and was on the Pee Wee's Playhouse show. Phil Hartman, of course, got the audition with SNL, and they show that what happened was that he got the gig. I mean, I think Paul Reubens, they kind of portrayed as Paul Reubens being, or Pee Wee was not fully betrayed, but he felt a little betrayed by that. And Phil Hartman was like, "What was I supposed to do?" And unfortunately, they were estranged. He was his closest friend, I guess, but um, he was very demanding, very controlling, obviously, but he still had his charm, And my personal experience with Pee Wee Herman, though, is I remember the movie. I remember when the movie came out. I only sort of knew the name, and I was pretty young. I was like 8 years old, 9, whatever it was. I remember my friend, one of my good friends when I was growing up, knew more about it. And then I remember the show after that, but for some reason I thought the show existed before it, but it did like on stage, but I thought it had been around before that. But then it was on. I only remember the "Good morning, Mr. Breakfast" and the bacon and stuff. And I was kind of creeped out by the talking chair that with the eyes and the mouth and stuff, or I was creeped out by that. It was, again, I was 9, 10 years old. That was kind of creepy, but and I didn't really watch Pee Wee's Playhouse that much. In retrospect, it probably would be something I would have enjoyed or could enjoy still. You could see Michel Gondry being highly influenced by. It was expensive to make. They had a lot of people working on that show. And the thing is, I don't think a lot of them got acknowledged. There were like dozens of people that with the props and the puppetry and all this stuff that they did in the animation. Yeah, like it was like Mr. Bill, evolved in some way. Um, Partly, I think part of my perception of that show was it was a Saturday morning show, so it was for younger kids, and so I thought this is stupid, just for little kids. But nah, I mean it was subversive and but it was just very creative, and like my love of Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman to some degree, even almost you can see the influence in some to some degree with that, um, in the movies after that, I don't know if I saw part of the Big Top Huey a little bit, but I don't know. I felt like he was kind of a one trick pony from perception, but you watch the documentary, in some ways he was way more than that. Um, but he was definitely sort of polarizing is not the right word. He definitely was one of these people that had a strong personality and at some point his ego may have eclipsed his accomplishments and talents. Even though he was very big, he was iconic to some degree. So I don't know how iconic he was outside the U.S. I think he was somewhat, but um, and he was fun. Some of the lines were funny. It's like the way he laughed and some of those like catchphrases. I know you are, but what am I? And he has had that guy in the movie that I know from the Teen Wolf movie and also Leprechaun, the heavyset actor. I forget what the guy's actor's name, but yeah, I mean, think about he was acting. It was a little bit like Sheldon in some ways. He was like, he was like 35, 40 years old at that point in real, like his physical body. And the Pee Wee Herman was like maybe even a little older than that, but basically portraying someone who's like maybe in their late mid teens, the personality of in some ways. But, that whole bike thing and, so my bike, but and the whole voice thing, the way he talks so much differently, it's weird. Gilbert Godfrey and Bobcat Goldthwait, a lot of actors have done that where they get these other persona voices, and they're not their real voices at all. But I mean, it's definitely worth seeing. I wonder though a little bit with like the Whitney Houston estate, some of these other art like George Michael even there could be another documentary about him in some respects done by someone who wants to purely tell the story 100% from his interest, not him being gone. But most of these documentaries seem to be about people that are gone. The Steve Martin one thankfully wasn't. He's still around. It was done about him, but um that was partly what my takeaway from is that it talked a lot about it, but the way it was portrayed by this director at points, I wonder if Paul Reubens himself would have been, 100% on board with. I mean, a lot of it I'm sure he was fine with. The thing is he was making it, but he spent a lot of time making it. So a little bit like George Michael did the same thing with the last documentary that was made about him, but I don't know, but it's worth seeing if you grew up in the 80s, you knew Pee Wee Herman or Paul Reubens. But got a couple documentaries coming out. I just saw about. We got there's an Eddie Murphy one coming sometime this summer, I think, which should be good. I think. I mean, I'm looking forward to that. My wife is too. I just found out the Warning Girls have one coming on Netflix this fall. The King's X one, I don't know what's going to happen with that. That was supposed to happen maybe in April or this month, but some of the footage is out there, but I don't know. It's one of those things, and you know, there's too much work still left to get done. Maybe in a couple of years. I think there's a couple others I'm not even remembering, but the documentaries seem to be the thing. I mean, um, they're always being made, and they're less money to produce than even though that from a time standpoint they can be to make it well, make them good, to make them done well, but more of these people in Hollywood and stuff probably should have documentaries. Hopefully, a lot of them while they're still here. But I'm surprised there hasn't been a really good one on Robin Williams at this point. But again, some of it has to do with their estate needs to be happy and okay with the way they're portrayed and stuff. It's like the way that the Queen movie was done. They were gonna with Sacha Baron Cohen. It wasn't gonna portray Freddie Mercury the way that the Queen members and his estate really wanted. So some of that is the challenge of making documentaries especially about famous people. So, um, but anyway, that's about it for the Pee Wee as himself. But check it out if you haven't seen it on um, HBO Max. It has like 3 hours, but I got more stuff to do. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.